Welcome back. Oh, I get excited when a good friend of mine in our show, Dave Duncan, joins us with the Dave Duncan Group at Keller Williams. And, this guy he's, not to date you there, Dave, but you've been in the industry, in the real estate industry, a long time. And you've kind of seen the ups and the downs and the arounds. And here we are now after coming out of a pretty tough spot. And I think the consensus is we are off the bottom, moving up. How do you see, how are you, first of all, man?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me back. I always like it. Brent, you're always a pleasure.
Well, thank you. And it's good to see you. And, let's, before we even get into business, with the weather like this, your golf game's probably getting a little bit better, huh?
Well, it should have. As you know, I played with someone last week, and there were bright moments and not so bright moments. So.
Yeah.
And I played Friday and played terrible, but I do have a tournament Saturday and Sunday.
If you could just pull it all together, wouldn't that be nice, just for one day? So let's talk a little bit about the real estate market. At the beginning of the hour, I was mentioning the motivations that people have right now. When it comes to a hot market, there's going to be motivations for people to jump into it. What do you see as some of those key motivating factors?
You touched on a few of them. Maybe they got to move because the house they're renting sold, or the rents are going up, or the family's getting bigger, all the things you said. But what I see, because we do a lot of first-time home buyer classes too, and I think the public has realized, and the news media is getting behind it now, that there hasn't been a better time than this forever. And I agree with you. I've been wrong for 3 or 4 years in a row saying it's a great time. Then it got better. Then it got better. So I think it's just the rates and the payment. And this is one point in time where you can get more house for a lower monthly payment than ever before. And after the election, I think the census a lot of it will change.
That it could. That's something that people have talked about, just simply with the confidence that comes back. When you start talking, you talk about first-time home buyers. Do you think there's a lot of, groupthink? The media comes out and says, and, front page of Sale Times about a month ago, a month and a half, prices are up in Seattle 10.5%. Then you see it come out again, prices are up 2% in a month. And, I've heard 6% since the beginning of the year. You hear all these numbers, and now it gets people, excited again to, hey, this might actually be a decent investment, not just a place to live.
You're seeing that a lot, too, during the 2, 7, 8, 9 time. There wasn't money available anywhere. Not from the banks. Private parties didn't bring out any money. But the minute the bank-owned stuff started coming on the market, back when the FDIC took over Citibank and Frontier, and these things, and it had appraisers from across the country giving lousy appraisers, so things were priced stupid low. It's amazing the cash that came out of the woodwork. They were just laying dormant for the right time.
And so now do you see that cash entering the market on a lot of different stages?
Well, the big investors that are wise enough to see it coming and wait for the right time, that happened fast. But now you're right. We are seeing more guys who are thinking, maybe now is the time to get that second home or upgrade and keep mine as a rental, that kind of thing.
And what about you work with a lot of builders. You work with a lot of new construction. And we hit on this a little bit before as far as, the people are buying up property. Is their motivation, I would imagine, purely financial at that point in time? They just see this as a market they can go build and make money in.
Let me give you a great example. I got the 50-lot plat coming up by the Aldenwood Mall. And when we were talking about pricing, and they're small, little skinny houses, and when we were talking about pricing back in February, or maybe January even, I was telling them I need something under $200,000, and then, go up from there. And they said, well, 210, 215 is the bottom. So that's what we've been planning. But then we had to revisit it about a month ago, and now I think that's going to be like 250 to about 3.25.
Wow.
And you multiply that by 50, and there's a significant upside for those guys, but I think they'll still sell because there's nothing out there.
Yeah, that seems to be the big problem right now, and it's been across all sorts of all the news channels. It's been discussed here certainly many times. Is simply the lack of inventory. So it would seem that if you're a builder and you can build houses fairly quickly, it would be a pretty good time for you.
Absolutely, no. I'm excited about being the listing agent for $50. but back to timing though, they had another project that wasn't mine, but they had no sales until they got the model done. Then boom, they sold. There were only 20 there, but they sold them pretty quick. Then, fast forward to this plat, we normally would have waited till mid to late September when the first ones are done. But because of such a shortage, we're going to probably put them on the market by the end of the month, and just to snag some of those buyers that are frustrated because they can't find anything.
So from a seller's perspective, I mean, and obviously with the builders being sellers, the motivation seems to be that prices have come up and you can capture a few more bucks.
Yeah, and not just for builders, too. We're seeing more of the traditional market come back. We call them equity sellers in the business, but somebody...
It's funny that they now have to have a name, right? Like, people who have equity and are selling their house are now a different type of seller.
That's true. That's our language speak that we always create.
Real estate speak. We have mortgage speak, Yeah, I get it.
In my company, we have Keller speak. There's a lot of different acronyms for everything. But we are seeing more of those come back in the market. And a lot of the agents that didn't adapt, that didn't do REO, short sales, didn't work with builders, a lot of those guys that struggled for 5 years are now starting to do better again because they can go back to their center of influence or past clients, and they're seeing more of a regular source of business from them.
We're here with Dave Duncan with the Dave Duncan Group at Keller Williams. And Dave, so when you have people who are thinking about selling and, with prices going up, do you tend to see people pricing higher and higher to see what the market will bear, or are people still pricing to sell?
That's a great question. We are seeing that more and more, but I had an interesting conversation yesterday with our top agent in my office, and he said, we were kind of experimenting. He was sharing it at one of our leadership meetings. He says, we were experimenting, so we were listing things at like 10 and 20,000 higher than what we knew the market was, just to see what would happen. We figured we'd probably still get multiple offers. He said, but they were ignored. They got nothing. And then of course, they dropped them back lower, and they got more activity. Now, this probably wouldn't happen in Seattle with Steve, but up in Snohomish County, that happens.
So really, there is still that element of pricing it right, not just trying to squeeze every dollar out of the market, which, when you think of something being hot, I mean, you think back to the mid-2000s, 2005, 2006, I know one of the strategies, well, price ahead of the market, because eventually it will just get there.
Yeah, well, it's true. I mean, I remember taking listings that I knew were too much because it was going up 1.5%, 2% a month, and I knew 4 or 5 months at the worst it'd be there.
And now that just the buyer's mentality doesn't seem to capture that?
It all depends on how many houses they've lost already. When a buyer, and it's really competitive. A lot of buyers do lose houses. And somebody said the phrase to me years ago, but it's stuck, is, when maybe we picked one buyer instead of another, and then they said, well, at least it'll make my buyer a better one for the next house because it'll get more realistic.
Yeah. And I think that's probably a huge key to this whole game that people are playing right now.
That's back to the stick we were talking about.
Back to the stick, right? Well, I got to move. The house I want is for sale, and the rent I don't want to pay is going up. So it makes a lot of sense. Do you think that when sellers are out there, as you called them, equity sellers, which is kind of that traditional piece, where do you think what are the most important things they should think about if they're going to put their house on the market in a market like we have today?
Well, there's two kinds. The ones that just want to sell, and then they're sellers. Really, they're not buyers, or maybe they're downsizing. That's hard. They got to really make a business decision of, does it make sense to sell at these prices or not? But if they're a move-up buyer, it's an absolute no-brainer. They're going to get beat. Well, now not even get beat up, but they'll be taking less than they want on their place, but they're going to get that much better deal on the new place. That's just pretty traditional thinking, but so they should be looking at it seriously right now.
So, I mean, it would seem that some of the motivating factors become a little bit more numerical, maybe less emotional, or... If
you can. Some people are capable, some aren't. But do your best. Get good advice.
Get good advice and try to squeeze some numbers out of it. Well, Dave, what do you think then about with the builders coming back? Is there enough new construction coming off where the buyers won't be frustrated, or are we still going to have a huge lack of inventory? The builders can't build fast enough.
In Snohomish County and King County too, what we're going to see, especially next year, is a real shortage of lots. So that'll be the real test of. So there'll be fewer builders fewer builders, yes, but fighting for less lots. A lot of the big national guys have come in and bought a lot of them, so it's kind of squeezed out the little guys. We're starting to see some of the little guys come back, but the price of land has gone up significantly just in the last 6-8 months, and there's going to be that upward pressure. And builders are going to try to price to the top of the market, and that'll be the big question of, will the buyers keep paying more and more and more? I hope common sense prevails, of course, and we don't get back to 2005 and 2006.
Well, that seems to be the people, though, who can take the emotion out of it and just think about the numbers are going to be the big builders who are looking at balance sheets in order to make decisions, or they're looking at real prices and the ability to buy land and make a profit once they build. that probably doesn't ring quite as true for your average home buyer or seller because, of course, you get caught up in the emotion of it.
Sure, it's how much money am I going to get out of my house, and can it help me get into the new home at the payment that I can afford? But back to the builders, though. I mean, if it's a big builder, big national, and it's a big piece of land, they're going to blatantly overpay because they know there's a great shortage. One FDIC property, I think it appraised at 2.4 for 180 lots, and they paid 3.6, and that was generally above appraisal. But they're going to control, 4 or 5 years worth of inventory in one spot. And
so that puts them in a pretty big advantage, I would imagine.
Over time.
But I guess you've laid a lot of money out to get there.
Yeah, that's a whole other conversation I won't get into here. When you have a public company versus a private company, it's got to really make a profit rather than big charge-offs.
It's a little bit like the big banks versus small banks.
Pretty much. Yeah.
When you have unlimited funds, it makes for quite a different purchase strategy for a builder.
Yeah. I know my guys I've been working with are frustrated with that at times. They've lost some pieces, but they've also got plenty of them too. So
yeah, what are the builders putting in houses that are really motivating buyers to go buy? Is it still the granite countertops and the great rooms, or is there any different styles they're running with?
This doesn't answer your question, but by necessity they're going skinnier and smaller just because the lots are that way. But they still want to throw in the basics, the granite countertops, the hardwood floors. There was one builder, obviously it's a Japanese-Australian combination builder that's out of the east side here now, but they bought it.
Sounds like a interesting combination.
Yeah, it's a long story how
I just think of like a little Japanese dog and like an Australian shepherd or something.
They didn't mate. But here's a feature I hadn't seen though, because they're small backyards, but they have nice fencing, gazebo kind of things in the backyard with huge barbecues, and then they threw that feature, which most builders would say that would never pencil, but that's just a unique selling feature to that particular guy that people have bought into.
So kind of that outdoor living area.
Yeah, it's not any bigger than where we are right now, but yes.
But in the summer, certainly, right?
Exactly.
Makes a lot of sense for people.
That's in Everett.
Yeah, well, right, yeah, and that's people are so the outdoor space is a hot thing.
Yes, it is.
Benjamin.
That is my phone droiding. Good job. Sometimes I need to take my own advice here. And so, Dave, what else? I see you brought some more statistics to run through, and we just have a couple of minutes left before we have to go to break. What are some of the big trending numbers that you see that are pretty important here when you go into the end of summer?
Well, I think this is why it won't change. It'll stay strong the rest of this year. It's just a couple inventory numbers. June of 2011, active listings in King County were 8,100. Mm-hmm. As of the end of June 2012, it's 5,100. I mean, that explains why there's so few choices. And I've got a couple of those stats too, whether it's new homes or condos, but they run very similar.
So it really is the fact that there's just not enough houses to feed the buyers. Exactly.
And with the rates, again, that's the big fear is rates going up. But it's fun right now working with buyers when you get them in a house and maybe something goes wrong and it takes a little longer to close, which I know it never happens with you, but it does with me sometimes.
Sure. Well, but that's part of the stress. That's part of the deal these days is the closing period. And that demotivates people. I know from the mortgage side, we've seen people get unmotivated because there's so much paperwork. And if you're like, I don't want to go through the process, we see it not necessarily on the purchase side, but refinancing right now. And you're like, well, you could save $3,000 or $4,000 a year. Yeah, but I did that like a year ago, and it was hard. So there's two sides to that coin.
Well, what I was going to say, the one thing that helps, I got one that's closing this week that's taken. I'm embarrassed to say how long, but you keep the rates gone from 4.5 to 4.25. I mean, I think he locked in at 3.5.
So he's probably happy.
He's happy now.
Yeah, nobody cares when rates keep going down that it takes a little bit longer.
No, exactly.
But that's great. Well, Dave, thanks so much for joining us again. Dave Duncan with the Dave Duncan Group at Keller Williams. And Dave, stick around. We'll talk a little bit more about the motivating factors and where the market may be headed for the rest of the summer.
You got it.
When we come back, we got Steve Kennedy for the first time with RE/MAX, another RE/MAX Hall of Famer joining our show. Talk a little bit about Queen Anne. You may have seen his signs. They're pretty recognizable if you live up there. And he's got lots of information for you. We'll be right back after this break.